Being that I'm Catholic and have a tattoo on my arm, I've received several questions about what the church teaches on tattoos and whether or not somebody should get a tattoo. So essentially, the church doesn't have an official stance on tattoos in the catechism, but when we look at what Jesus taught when he was on earth, the number one commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Tattoos kind of vary throughout history. When you look at different cultures and different things like that, things shift for what tattoos mean. Way back when, back before like 12,000 BC, they talked about how tattoos originated with marking slaves. So a lot of the time throughout history, we see tattoos as an example of identification. So it would be a slave. It would be somebody, if they were celebrating a voyage that they had just undergone. All of these different things, they like mark a point in time or identify a person for who they are. So whenever we're thinking about getting a tattoo, one of the examples that I saw was, think about this. If you had a Ferrari, would you want to put a bumper sticker on it? Now, if you did, you may choose something that's a little more tasteful than honk if you like cheese. So when we start looking at what we would get on our bodies, like my tattoo, I have a whole video on it if you really want to know all the backstory, but it's, if you're patiently persistent, you can ultimately achieve perfection. Then there's persevere and prudence with some semicolons on there, a compass for if I take the wrong turn, and then a phoenix for rebirth. So the whole mythology of the phoenix, which actually comes from Harry Potter, but that's for a different video. So when I chose these tattoos, I've gone back about 5 different times, and every time I went, I committed to something different in my life. And so each part of it signifies a significant turning point of how I was living my life and what I was choosing to do. So this tattoo isn't offensive. It doesn't have any type of racial slurs. It's not, I definitely wouldn't recommend getting something like F Jesus. Anything that could be offensive to our neighbor should be avoided. Anything that's sexually explicit. When we look at the Army or the Air Force, they have restrictions on what types of tattoos are permitted and also where they are in your body. Like they can't have neck or face or arm or leg tattoos in some instances. It just depends. Back in the day, the seamen, they used to go and get tattoos so that if they would get lost at sea and then their bodies were found, they could be identified. And these tattoos were actually valued as high as a birthmark was. So just knowing, I was talking to one priest once that when we talk about our body in heaven, that perhaps the scars and the tattoos that aided in our salvation will remain on our bodies. When we look at Christ, he still had the scars from his crucifixion in his new body after he had died. So when we start to look at okay, if I want to get a tattoo, how is it serving me? Is it showing that I'm loving God beyond myself? And is it tasteful? Is it something that's not offensive, that, kind of identifies me for who I am? In our culture now, tattooing is just more of an artistic expression, people get the mandalas, people do all types of different things just to have something pretty or cute on us. But, and that's fine, as long as it's tasteful and it's not disrespectful in any way. The Catholic Church doesn't really have anything against it, per se, necessarily. But just bearing in mind that our body is still a temple, and to just deface it just for the sake of defacement is maybe something that should be avoided. But if there is something that you really, really want, pray about it, give it some time. If after a couple months you still want that same tattoo. A while back I was talking to my husband about how I wanted to get a rosary on my arm, and he's like, I need to think about that one a while. And I thought about that when I was thinking about this video, and it's yeah, I don't know if I would still do that. So just give it time. Don't be impulsive about it. Really pray and meditate and discern whether or not the tattoo is going to aid in your salvation and the salvation of others. So God bless you all. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again next week.